After the Parkinson's diagnosis, I heard my daughter-in-law say to my son, "I'm not taking care of that old woman. Put her in a nursing home." He didn't defend me. The following week, I canceled the mortgage. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought that at 70 years old, I'd be sitting alone on the edge of my bed, tears streaming down my face, trying to muffle my sobs with a pillow. But that's what happens when you overhear your own son refusing to defend you against the cruelest suggestion imaginable. It had started as just another Tuesday. The tremor in my right hand had been getting worse for months, but I kept dismissing it as age or stress. Everyone shakes a little at my age, I'd tell myself. But when I dropped my third coffee cup in a week, my neighbor Martha finally convinced me to see Dr. Patel. The diagnosis hit me like a freight train: Parkinson's disease. I sat in that sterile examination room, the fluorescent lights suddenly too bright, as Dr. Patel explained what was happening to my body. "We caught it relatively early, Estelle," he said, his kind eyes meeting mine. "With proper medication and therapy, many patients maintain their independence for years." Independence. The word echoed in my mind as I drove home, my hands gripping, the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I'd been independent my whole life, especially after Harold died 23 years ago, leaving me to raise Carlton alone. Now my own body was betraying me. I pulled into my driveway, sitting in the car for several minutes, trying to gather the courage to walk inside and face my new reality. Carlton and his wife Leilani were visiting, staying in the guest room for the week while their kitchen was being renovated. I needed to tell them, but I couldn't find the words. How do you tell your only child that you're sick? That someday you might need help? I finally made my way inside, moving quietly through the back door. I planned to go straight to my room, collect myself, and then break the news over dinner. But as I passed the guest room, I heard their voices. Leilani's, sharp and clear, Carlton's lower but distinct. "This changes everything," Leilani was saying. "A nursing home is the only option." I froze, my hand reaching for the wall to steady myself. "My mom would hate that," Carlton replied, his voice hesitant. "So what's your solution? You want us to be her caretakers?" "I didn't sign up to look after your mother." Leilani's voice dripped, with contempt. "I'm not going to waste my life taking care of that old woman. Just throw her in a home and be done with it." I waited, heart pounding, for my son to defend me. To say something, anything, that showed he valued me as more than a burden. But there was only silence, followed by his resigned sigh. "Let's talk about this later," he finally said. "She doesn't even know her diagnosis yet." My legs nearly gave out beneath me. They knew. Somehow they already knew what Dr. Patel had told me just hours ago. Had the doctor called them? Had Carlton been talking to my doctors behind my back? I crept to my bedroom, careful not to make a sound. Once inside, I sank onto my bed, the weight of betrayal far heavier than any disease diagnosis. The tears came silently at first, then in heaving sobs that I smothered with my pillow. "Throw her in a home." Leilani's words cut deeper than any knife. But it was Carlton's silence that broke my heart. My son, whom I'd sacrificed everything for, couldn't even speak up for me. Through my tears, my eyes fell on the family photo on my nightstand. Carlton's college graduation. My arm was around him, my face beaming with pride. I'd worked 2 jobs to put him through school after Harold died. Teaching during the day, bookkeeping at night. I'd gone without so he could have everything, and now, at the moment I needed him most, he couldn't even defend my dignity. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually the tears subsided, replaced by something else. A quiet, steely resolve. I straightened my back, wiped my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. "Estelle Morgan," I whispered to my reflection, You've been taking care of yourself your whole life. This changes nothing. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Everything had changed. The scales had fallen from my eyes, and for the first time I saw my son and my place in his life with perfect clarity. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the folder containing all the financial documents. The mortgage papers for Carlton and Leilani's house stared back at me. The house I'd been helping them pay for since they got married 5 years ago. The house they'd insisted was too small to have me visit for more than a few days at a time. My hand trembled as I closed the folder, but this time it wasn't from Parkinson's. It was from anger and determination. If they saw me as nothing but a burden to be discarded, then perhaps it was time I stopped being so useful to them. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Leilani's cruel words and Carlton's damning silence playing on repeat in my mind. As the first light of dawn filtered through my curtains, I made myself a cup of tea and settled into the rocking chair by my bedroom window. The neighborhood was still sleeping, peaceful and unaware of how my world had shattered. I found myself looking at the framed photos arranged on my bookshelf, a visual timeline of my life. Harold and me on our wedding day, so young and full of hope. Carlton as a toddler, riding his first tricycle. My classroom of 5th graders from 1992, the year I was nominated for Teacher of the Year. Each image a piece of the life I'd built. After Harold's sudden heart attack, I was left with an 8-year-old son, a mortgage, and a teacher's salary that barely covered our needs. I could have crumbled then. Many would have. Instead, I picked up evening work doing bookkeeping for local businesses. For 15 years, I graded papers during my lunch hour so I could work a second job after school. I missed sleep, not Carlton's baseball games. I remembered the day the principal offered me the position of curriculum director. It would have meant a significant pay increase, but also longer hours and summer work. Carlton was entering high school, those vulnerable years when kids need guidance most. I declined the promotion, telling myself there would be other opportunities. There weren't. By the time Carlton left for college, the position had been filled, and the career ladder I'd put on hold had disappeared. But I never regretted it, not when I saw Carlton graduate with honors, not when he landed his first corporate job, not even when he married Leilani, though something about her always felt calculating. "You spoiled him," my sister Jane had said after the wedding. I'd dismissed her words then, but now they came back to haunt me, had I? Looking back, I could see the pattern. Carlton never had summer jobs in high school because I wanted him to enjoy his youth. When he needed a car for college, I dipped into my retirement savings rather than having him take out a loan. After graduation, I paid the security deposit on his first apartment because starting out is so expensive these days. Each decision made sense at the time. Each sacrifice seemed worth it. But sitting here now, I wondered if I'd done him a disservice. Had I raised a son who expected everything to be handled for him? Who saw his mother as a resource rather than a person? When Carlton and Leilani decided to buy their house, far larger than 2 people needed, they'd come to me with the numbers. "We're just a little short on the down payment," Carlton had explained, spreadsheets neatly arranged on my kitchen table, "and the monthly payments will be tight for the first few years." I'd offered to help without hesitation. What else would a mother do? I took out a home equity loan and gave them the down payment as a gift. Then I set up the monthly transfers to supplement their mortgage payments, telling myself it was temporary. 5 years later, I was still making those transfers. And when they wanted to renovate their kitchen, a kitchen already nicer than mine, had ever been, I hadn't questioned it. The teacup in my hand had gone cold. I set it down and reached for my laptop, something I rarely used first thing in the morning. I logged into my bank account and stared at the recurring payment, while our $200 transferred to Carlton and Leilani's account on the first of every month. a sum that represented hours of my labor, years of my sacrifice. Just throw her in a home. The words still stung, but now they also clarified something. I'd been so busy being needed that I hadn't seen I wasn't wanted, not for myself anyway. Just for what I could give. I opened another tab and typed, Parkinson's disease support groups. Then, independent living with Parkinson's. Then, activities for seniors. With each search, a new world of possibilities opened before me. For so long, I'd defined myself by what I gave to others, to my students, to Carlton. What might my life look like if I redirected that energy toward myself? A notification popped up on my phone. Mortgage transfer, scheduled for tomorrow. My finger hovered over the screen. One tap, and I could cancel it. One decision, and everything would change. I heard movement downstairs. Carlton and Leilani were awake. Soon they'd expect me to make breakfast, as I'd done every morning of their visit. They'd sit at my table, eat my food, accept my generosity, all while planning to discard me at the first sign of inconvenience. A clarity I hadn't felt in years washed over me. I was not just Carlton's mother or a checkbook with legs. I was Estelle Morgan, former teacher, widow, survivor. And I had one more lesson to teach, perhaps the most important one of all. I tapped cancel payment and watched as the confirmation appeared on my screen. For the first time since hearing the diagnosis, I smiled. Downstairs, I heard Carlton call my name. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and headed for the door. I may have Parkinson's, but I was not powerless. Not anymore. The next morning, I walked into my kitchen with purpose. Carlton and Leilani were already seated at the table, scrolling through their phones. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Carlton looked up, his expression unreadable. "Morning, Mom. We were thinking about going out for breakfast. Want to join us?" The invitation surprised me. Part of me wanted to accept, to pretend yesterday hadn't happened. But I couldn't unsee what I'd seen, unhear what I'd heard. No, thank you. I have an appointment. Leilani raised an eyebrow. Another doctor's appointment already? So they definitely knew about my diagnosis. The confirmation stung, but I kept my face neutral. Actually, I'm meeting with my financial advisor. I watched their reaction carefully. Carlton's posture stiffened slightly, while Leilani's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Anything wrong?" Carlton asked, his tone casual but eyes alert. "Not wrong," I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Just time to reorganize some things. At my age, it's important to have everything in order." Leilani's smile didn't reach her eyes. "That's so responsible of you, Estelle. Have you thought about what we discussed before? About possibly selling this big house? It must be so much work for you." I sipped my coffee, letting the moment stretch. They'd been pushing me to sell my home for years, suggesting I move into a condo or someplace smaller. Now I understood why. "I'm considering all my options," I said finally. "This house has been my home for 40 years. I'm not quite ready to let it go." After they left for breakfast, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list. First, I called James Hoffman, my attorney. Harold had introduced us decades ago, and he'd handled my husband's estate after his death. He agreed to see me that afternoon. Next, I called Margaret Wilson. We'd taught together for 20 years before she retired to start a consulting business for seniors transitioning to new living situations. If anyone could help me navigate this new reality, it was Margaret. My final call was to Dr. Patel's office. The receptionist confirmed that someone had called yesterday requesting information about my condition. "We explained that we couldn't discuss your medical details without your consent," she assured me. "Who called?" I asked, though I already knew. "A man identifying himself as your son." I thanked her and hung up, anger simmering beneath my skin. Not only had Carlton gone behind my back, but he'd tried to violate my privacy, all while planning to throw me in a home. James's office was exactly as I remembered, leather-bound books lining the walls, the scent of lemon polish in the air. He greeted me with a warm handshake and genuine concern when I told him about my diagnosis. "I'm sorry, Estelle. That's difficult news." "Yes, but that's not why I'm here." I took a deep breath. "I need to change some financial arrangements." I explained about the mortgage payments, the home equity loan, the various ways I'd been supporting Carlton and Leilani. James listened without judgment, taking notes and occasionally asking questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "So you want to stop these payments?" "Yes, but there's more." I straightened my shoulders. "I need to protect myself. If my condition progresses, I want to ensure that I'm the one making decisions about my care, not my son." James nodded gravely. "We should update your advance directive and power of attorney. I'd recommend naming someone other than Carlton for these roles." My stomach clenched at the suggestion, but I knew he was right. "My sister Jane," I said after a moment. "She's always been practical, and she'll respect my wishes." By the time I left James's office, I had a plan in motion. The mortgage payments would stop. My assets would be reorganized to prioritize my care. Most importantly, I would control my own future. Margaret met me for coffee the next day. Her familiar laugh and no-nonsense attitude exactly what I needed. I told her everything: the diagnosis, Leilani's cruel words, Carlton's betrayal, my decision to cut financial ties. "Good for you," she said fiercely. "Now, let's talk about what you want your life to look like." For the next hour, we discussed options, independent living communities, in-home care services for when I might need them, support groups for Parkinson's patients, physical therapy to maintain mobility. "And what about you, Estelle?" Margaret asked. "Not your condition, not your care, you. What do you want for yourself?" The question caught me off guard. For so long, my identity had been wrapped up in being Carlton's mother, in being needed. Who was I beyond that? "I always wanted to teach adult literacy," I said slowly. "Memories, surfacing." After retirement, I thought about volunteering, but then Carlton and Leilani got married, and somehow I never found the time. Margaret smiled. "It's not too late." As I drove home, my mind buzzed with possibilities. For the first time since the diagnosis, I felt something like hope. My life wasn't over. It was changing. And maybe, just maybe, these changes were long overdue. When I pulled into my driveway, Carlton's car was there. I found him in the kitchen, a strange expression on his face. "Mom," he said, his voice tight. "We need to talk about the mortgage payment." And there it was. He hadn't noticed my diagnosis, my fears, or my pain. But he'd noticed the money. Immediately. "Yes," I replied calmly, setting my purse down. "I suppose we do." Carlton stood by the kitchen counter, his phone clutched in his hand. The notification from the bank must have come through. His expression was a mixture of confusion and something darker, entitlement. "There was a problem with the transfer," he said, his tone suggesting this was a simple clerical error that I would quickly fix. Pulled out a chair and sat down, motioning for him to do the same. "It wasn't a problem, Carlton. I canceled it." His face flushed. "Canceled it? Why would you do that without talking to me first?" "The same reason you called my doctor without talking to me first," I replied evenly. The color drained from his face. "Mom, I heard you and Leilani talking." I kept my voice steady, though my heart raced. "The day of my diagnosis, I heard everything." Carlton's eyes widened with recognition, then darted away in shame. "You don't understand. Leilani was just upset. She didn't mean—" To suggest throwing me in a nursing home at the first sign of illness? To treat me like a burden to be discarded? The words came out sharper than I intended, years of unacknowledged hurt behind them. It wasn't like that, he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. What was it like then? I asked quietly. Explain to me why my son, who I have supported, in every possible way, couldn't defend his mother's dignity. Carlton ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that my chest ached. You're taking this out of context. We were just discussing options, planning for the future. My future, without consulting me. He had the decency to look ashamed, but it didn't last. His expression hardened. That still doesn't explain why you canceled the mortgage payment. We were counting on that money, Mom. The words hung in the air between us, confirming everything I'd feared. It wasn't love or concern that brought him to my kitchen today. It was the missing money. I've been thinking about my own future, I said. With this diagnosis, I need to ensure I can care for myself. That means reassessing my finances. So you're just cutting us off? Just like that? His voice rose, indignation replacing shame. After everything. What, Carlton? I interrupted, my patience fraying. After everything I've done for you? After working 2 jobs to put you through college? After helping you buy a house you couldn't afford? After supporting you financially well into your 30s? He flinched as if I'd slapped him. That's not fair. You offered to help. You said you wanted to. And I did. But I never thought my own son would be plotting to put me in a home while taking my money. The back door opened before Carlton could respond. Leilani stepped in, her eyes darting between us, immediately sensing the tension. What's going on? She asked, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes calculating. Carlton turned to her, his expression strained. Mom knows about our conversation, about the doctor. Leilani's mask of concern slipped for just a moment, revealing irritation underneath. But she recovered quickly, moving to sit beside me, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Estelle, you misunderstood, she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. We were just worried about you, about making sure you had the best care. By discussing nursing homes before I even came home with my diagnosis? I asked. By going behind my back to my doctor? Leilani's eyes hardened. Someone had to be practical. Carlton was too emotional to think clearly. I almost laughed. Carlton? Emotional? The son who couldn't even defend me against his wife's cruelty? But Leilani wasn't finished. And now you're punishing us by withholding money we need, she continued, her true colors showing. Do you know how tight our budget is? That kitchen renovation has already gone over budget, and without your help, that's enough, Carlton. Cut in, finally seeming to realize how she sounded. But it was too late. The truth was laid bare, ugly, and undeniable. My son and his wife saw me as nothing more than a checkbook with a pulse. I've made my decision, I said, standing up. I will no longer be contributing to your mortgage or any other expenses. My finances need to be directed toward my own care now. This is ridiculous, Leilani snapped, abandoning all pretense of compassion. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Leilani? I asked, genuinely curious. Name one thing. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, clearly searching for an example that didn't exist. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Carlton stood up, his face a storm of emotions. Mom, be reasonable. We're family. Families help each other. Yes, they do, I agreed. Families also respect each other. They listen to each other. They don't plot to send their mothers to nursing homes or steal their medical information. Leilani made a sound of disgust. This is exactly why elderly people shouldn't live alone. They get paranoid, start making bad decisions. I'm not elderly, I cut in, my voice sharp. I'm 70 years old with a neurological condition that I intend to manage independently for as long as possible. And the only bad decision I've made was enabling my son to become a man who would stand by while his wife suggested throwing his mother away. The silence that followed was deafening. Carlton looked torn between anger and shame. Leilani's face was flushed with rage. "I think you should leave," I said finally. "Both of you." "Mom," Carlton started, but I held up my hand. "I'm not cutting you out of my life, Carlton. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference." I moved toward the door, signaling that the conversation was over. "When you're ready to have a relationship based on respect rather than financial support, you know where to find me." They left with minimal protest, Leilani storming out while Carlton lingered, seemingly wanting to say something more, but unable to find the words. After they drove away, I sat on my porch swing, exhausted but strangely at peace. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I had spoken my truth. I had stood up for myself. The future was uncertain, my health, my relationship with my son, everything. But for now, I had taken back control of my story. And that was enough. The weeks following my confrontation with Carlton and Leilani were oddly peaceful. I expected angry phone calls, perhaps even unannounced visits, but there was only silence. At first it hurt. The ease with which my son could cut me out of his life once the money stopped flowing was a painful confirmation of everything I'd realized. But as days turned into weeks, I found myself breathing more easily. The weight of expectations, of constantly giving without receiving, had lifted. I threw myself into creating my new life. Dr. Patel had connected me with a neurologist specializing in Parkinson's, and together we developed a treatment plan. The medication helped control my tremors, and I began physical therapy twice a week. "Movement is medicine for Parkinson's patients," my therapist, Elena, explained during our first session. "The more active you stay, the better you'll manage your symptoms." It wasn't just my health I was rebuilding. Margaret had introduced me to Sunset Gardens, an active living community for seniors. Unlike the nursing homes Leilani had so callously suggested, Sunset Gardens offered independent apartments with optional services and a vibrant social calendar. "I'm not ready to sell my house yet," I told Margaret after touring the facility. "No, one said you had to," she replied. "But now you know your options. And in the meantime, their community center offers classes and activities for non-residents too." That's how I found myself, on a bright Tuesday morning, walking into a sunlit room where a dozen seniors sat in a circle, notebooks in hand. "Welcome to Creative Writing for Life Stories," said the instructor, a silver-haired woman named Dorothy. "You must be Estelle." I nodded, suddenly nervous. It had been years since I'd done anything just for myself, anything that wasn't about being Carlton's mother or a financial support system. "Take any seat," Dorothy encouraged. "We're just getting started." I chose a chair beside a gentleman with kind eyes and a cardigan that reminded me of Mr. Rogers. "First time?" he asked in a low voice. "That obvious?" He smiled. "I'm Walter, former accountant, current terrible poet. Estelle, former teacher, current." I paused, unsure how to define myself. "Work in progress?" Walter suggested. I laughed. Exactly. That class became the highlight of my week. Under Dorothy's guidance, we wrote about our childhoods, our greatest joys, our deepest regrets. The act of putting my life on paper helped me see patterns I'd missed. How my fear of abandonment after Harold's death had led me to cling to Carlton, to give too much, to erase my own needs. "You don't have to share if you're not comfortable," Dorothy always said before we read our pieces aloud. But I found I wanted to share, wanted to be seen and heard by these strangers who were quickly becoming friends. Walter and I began having coffee after class. He'd lost his wife to cancer 3 years earlier and was still finding his way in a world without her. Despite our different paths, we understood each other's loneliness. "My daughter visits every Sunday," he told me one day. "She brings my grandkids. It's the highlight of my week." The mention of family made my heart clench. "My son and I aren't speaking right now." Walter didn't press for details, just nodded sympathetically. "Family can be complicated." "I miss him," I admitted, surprising myself with the truth of it. Despite everything, I missed Carlton. Not the adult who had disappointed me, but the little boy who had once looked at me like I hung the moon. "Then maybe tell him that," Walter suggested gently. I considered his words on the drive home. Was reconciliation possible? Did I even want it, if nothing had changed? I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time, I was asking the questions. At home, I found a small package on my doorstep, a delivery from the local pharmacy, my new medication. As I bent to pick it up, a wave of dizziness hit me, a side effect I'd been warned about. I gripped the porch railing, waiting for it to pass. "Ms. Morgan, are you okay?" I looked up to see my new neighbor, Diane, watching me with concern from her driveway. She'd moved in a month ago, a retired nurse with a boisterous laugh and an impressive garden. "Just a bit dizzy," I assured her. "New medication." Diane crossed the lawn to my porch. "Let me help you inside." I started to refuse, a lifetime habit of not accepting help, but stopped myself. "Thank you, that would be kind." Inside, Diane insisted on making tea while I sat at the kitchen table. "My mother had Parkinson's," she said, moving around my kitchen with easy confidence. "Lived with it for 15 years, active till the end." "That's encouraging," I said, watching her. "Did you care for her?" Diane nodded. "Along with home health aides, we developed quite the system." She placed a steaming mug in front of me. "If you ever need a hand, I'm just next door. No strings attached." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, something tight in my chest loosening. "I appreciate that." After Diane left, I sat in my quiet kitchen, thinking about the day. I'd shared my writing with strangers who'd become friends. I'd accepted help from a neighbor without shame. Small steps, but significant ones. My phone chimed, with a text message. It was from Jane, my sister. "Just checking in. How are you feeling?" I texted back. "Better than expected. Having dinner with new friends Friday. We'll call you this weekend." Friends. The word felt right. In just a few weeks, I'd created the beginnings of a support network, not out of obligation or blood ties, but out of genuine connection. People who saw me as Estelle, not as a wallet or a burden. The doorbell rang, startling me. When I opened it, my heart stuttered in my chest. It was Carlton, alone, looking uncertain. "Mom," he said, his voice rough. "Can we talk?" I studied my son's face, the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. Part of me wanted to pull him into my arms, to comfort him as I had when he was small. Another part remembered his silence as Leilani suggested discarding me. But I wasn't the same woman who had heard those cruel words. I was stronger now, clearer, about my boundaries and worth. "Yes," I said, stepping back to let him in. "I think it's time we did." Carlton sat across from me at the kitchen table, his fingers nervously tracing the wood grain patterns. Neither of us spoke for several moments. The silence between us felt like a physical presence, years of unspoken truths and missed connections. "You've redecorated," he finally said, gesturing to the new curtains and the potted herbs lining my windowsill. "Small changes," I replied. "They help." He nodded, then took a deep breath. "Mom, I owe you an apology. What you heard that day, it wasn't what I really think." I regarded him steadily. "Then why didn't you say so at the time?" His eyes dropped to the table. I don't know. I guess I've always tried to keep the peace with Leilani. She gets upset easily, and it's easier to go along. Even when she's suggesting putting your mother in a nursing home against her will? Carlton flinched. I never would have let that happen. But you didn't tell her that, did you? I kept my voice gentle but firm. You didn't stand up for me. He shook his head, shame evident in the slump of his shoulders. No, I didn't, and I should have. I waited, sensing there was more he needed to say. Leilani left me, he finally admitted, the words coming out in a rush. 3 weeks ago. She said if I couldn't provide the lifestyle she deserved, there was no point staying married. My heart ached for him, despite everything. I'm sorry, Carlton. Don't be, he said, a bitter smile twisting his lips. You were right about her, about a lot of things. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Mom, about who I am, who I've become. I don't like what I see. I reached across the table and took his hand. It's never too late to change, Carlton. He squeezed my fingers. I've been so blind, so entitled. You gave, and I just took it as my due. I never stopped to think about what you might need. Why are you here now? I asked, needing to understand his motives. Not for money, he said quickly. I promise. I've taken a second job to cover the mortgage. It's tough, but I'm managing. He hesitated. I'm here because I miss my mom, and I'm terrified of losing you. Not to Parkinson's, but to my own selfishness. The simple honesty of his words touched something deep inside me. For the first time in our adult relationship, Carlton was seeing me as a person, not just as his mother or a source of support. Tell me about your treatment, he said. Is there anything I can do to help? We talked for hours. I told him about my medication, my therapy, the writing class, my new friends. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions, absorbing information. When I described the dizzy spells, he looked concerned, but didn't immediately try to take control. What about you? I asked eventually. How are you really doing? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Honestly, it's been rough. The house is too big for just me. Bills are piling up. I had no idea how much Leilani was spending. He shook his head. But that's my problem to solve, not yours. Those words, more than anything, showed me that something had truly changed. I've been thinking about selling the house, he continued. Getting something smaller, more affordable. Starting fresh. That sounds sensible, I said, proud of his practical approach. I also. He hesitated, then pushed on. I also started seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I let Leilani control everything, why I couldn't stand up to her, why I treated you the way I did. My eyes welled with tears. That takes courage, Carlton. I learned it from you, he said softly. You stood up for yourself, set boundaries. You showed me what real strength looks like. As the evening light faded, Carlton helped me prepare a simple dinner. We moved around the kitchen together, finding a new rhythm. It wasn't the easy familiarity of the past, but something different, more balanced, more respectful. Over dinner, Carlton asked about the photos on my refrigerator, pictures from my writing class, a group shot from a Parkinson's support walk, Diane and me planting tomatoes. You've built a whole new life, he observed. I had to, I replied. For the first time, I'm living for myself, not just for others. I'd like to be part of that life, he said cautiously. If you'll let me. I studied my son's face, the sincerity in his eyes, the humble set of his shoulders. I'd like that too. But things have to be different, Carlton. I won't go back to how it was. I don't want that either, he assured me. I want to be your son, not your dependent. I want to support you, not take from you. It will take time, I warned him. Trust has to be rebuilt. He nodded solemnly. I know. I'm prepared for that. As we cleared the dishes together, I thought about the past 6 months, how a devastating diagnosis and a cruel overheard conversation had ultimately led to this moment of genuine connection. Life's strange turns never cease to amaze me. 2 years later, I stand in the garden of my new home, a small cottage with just enough space for me and my needs. Carlton helped me find it when maintaining my old house became too difficult. It's closer to Sunset Gardens, where I now teach a writing class of my own, and to the community center where I volunteer with an adult literacy program. My Parkinson's has progressed, but slowly. I have good days and bad days. On the bad ones, I have a network of support, friends who check in, neighbors who help, and a son who visits regularly, bringing groceries and staying for long conversations. Carlton sold his too-large house and bought a modest condo nearby. He's dating again, a kind kindergarten teacher who treats me with genuine warmth. Leilani occasionally reaches out to him for help or money, but he's learned to set boundaries, a skill he says he learned from me. Today is Sunday, our standing dinner date. As I arrange flowers on the table, I hear his car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I watch him gather bags from the back seat, ingredients for the meal we'll cook together. The tremor in my hand is worse today, but I don't try to hide it anymore. Carlton will simply take over the tasks that require steady hands, without comment or pity. We've found our way to a new relationship, one built on mutual respect rather than dependency. My diagnosis was not the end I feared, but rather the beginning of something unexpected. It forced me to reevaluate everything. What I wanted, what I deserved, what truly mattered. It taught my son the value of character over convenience, of depth over shallow appearances. The doorbell rings, and I move to answer it, my steps slow but purposeful. This is not the life I planned, but it is, rich with meaning and connection. And as I open the door to my son's smiling face, I know with certainty that I wouldn't trade it for the world. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.